Good afternoon and welcome to the Three Rivers podcast. I am your host, Ed Troop, here on Oneberg across all of our Oneberg streaming networks on Facebook and on YouTube. It is Wednesday, March 27th, the final show for the month of March as we gear up for the start of April next week. The start of the Major League Baseball season is tomorrow, as well as the start of another Pittsburgh Pirates season. We're going to talk about that here this afternoon. And we're also going to talk about the NFL draft, which is only 1 month away from today. So 4 weeks to go. And then the Steelers will be on the clock at the 20th pick. And an interesting pick that will be for Omar Khan and company as well. But joining me on the show here this afternoon to talk all kind of stuff, not just Pirates or Steelers, there he is. It is Joe 412 from Draft Nation and Draft 412. Joe, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And I like the old school pirate, the Bucko logo behind you, man. It's your 'tis the season, right?
'Tis the season, and Joe, our pirate expert, Bucko fan forever, 365 days a year, is not with us today. Brian, for others, he is our Bucko in-house man. He eats, sleeps, and drinks Pirate baseball. Me, on the other hand, Joe, I always joke around. It's like a bad relationship with me. Every year around this time, I come back to it. I jump back in for about a month or two, and then by the end of May, I jump off that sinking ship. That what it is. It's a bad relationship, me and the Pittsburgh Pirates. But yes, once again, they have me hooked in. I'm excited for the start of another season.
Well, you're watching a team this year that's on the rise, right? And you can't say that often about the Pirates, but you can say over the last couple of years they've done a great job of creating one of the best farm systems in the majors, and there's a lot of exciting talent that we've been watching up close and in person in Bradenton, here in spring ball. Some of that talent's going to make its way up, to the big roster. Others we're going to see, scattered in places like Indianapolis and Altoona, over the next few months, and we might get a glimpse of some of these guys later in the year, like Paul Skeens and Tamar Johnson and some others, which is the real hope for the franchise, I think, as we get closer to having a competitive roster. Now, this year might be a lot more competitive than it's been over the last few years. They did go out and they plugged some holes, but I think a lot of things really rest on what happens with the rotation. They've got a one in Mitch Keller. And the rest are a bunch of question marks right now. There's some risks that they've got, and guys that are coming back, and guys that should, perform there. And also, you got the return of O'Neal Cruz, which, he was derailed last year with that horrific injury, and hoping he gets back to form, and that would help them not only in the field but also at the plate. And the continued development of Ke'Bryan Hayes. I think if there's going to be an issue with this team, it's going to be depth of starting pitching.
Right.
And outfield. And, outfield has been a weakness. We could probably talk a little bit about their decision to take Paul Skeens over Dylan Cruz, because Cruz could be a guy that could be starting for them, day one this year in the outfield. But, look, it's a team that's on the rise. They've got a lot of talent. Some of it still needs to develop, and it might be a year or so away. And I know that Bucko fans don't want to hear that. They hear that all the time. But truly, it might be this time, with some of the guys I've got in the minors. So, look, hope springs eternal, and we're here in the spring, and we're hoping that the Pirates put a product on the field this year that'll be competitive. And I don't think the St. Louis Cardinals are going to have the season they had last year.
Right.
So we'll see what happens here in the Central, but ultimately, they've got at least the makings of what could be a competitive team this year, and hopefully a championship team in the next couple.
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned some of the young talent on this team, not just in the minors, but on the current Major League roster. You get O'Neal Cruz back, as you mentioned, off the horrible injury from a year ago, but he seemed to have rehabbed very well in the wintertime, and so far this spring looked real good. He's hitting, 450 feet bomb home runs down in spring training. Hopefully that carries over to the regular season for him. We talked about Ke'Bryan Hayes. You mentioned Henry Davis as well at the catcher position. We think Henry Davis is going to finally settle in and be that catcher this year, right? And then you have Brian Reynolds as well coming back. And, they picked up, of course, in the offseason as well, Rowdy Tellez. So he's another guy that I think will be able to plug into this lineup and provide some power and some depth that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I'll go with that in reverse order. I mean, I think Rowdy is a kind of player that you're going to be able to depend on for some power. He might not be an everyday first baseman anymore. Who knows? I mean, I think that that's a place where they had to plug a hole. They had a giant hole at first base, and they still may. We'll see what happens as they get into the season here and how they address that. But a guy like Henry Davis, has a shot, right? This was a two catcher race until one of them can't play this year, so. Henry could step in, and they brought some veteran talent around that just in case it doesn't work out. And they've been working Henry in right field and in first base and other places too, trying to to find the future for the guy. But he's one of those talented guys that they spent a high draft pick on, in this case a number 1 draft pick on, to make this team, and it's time for him to step up and do that. And you're right about Cruz. I mean, Cruz is somebody that. His fielding and his bat are going to help this team. Reynolds was hot earlier in the year, got the big contract, kind of petered out at the end. Some questions about that last year, but again, he and Sawinski were at the heart of that outfield. Again, that's a weakness for the team. I mean, Reynolds is good, but there's no one behind him. Sawinski showed pop in the bat last year. But again, I'm not sure they've got more than, and they didn't address that at all in the offseason, and or at least to the point where you would think that they would have wanted to in the offseason. And in pitching, let's face it, they've got a nice core group of pitchers,
right?
In the minors. I don't know how many of them are here on opening day though, and that's the thing. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but I'm going to say it. Paul Skeens is the best player in this organization, bar none, top to bottom, and he's not here. Right. And you've got, Jones and Chandler. You can go down the list, of guys that might not be here that aren't going to help this team, at least in the beginning part of the season. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it. You're going to bring them along as they continue to grow. You don't want to, rush these guys through. I get that. But I think that's the big question mark. Behind Keller, do you have proven commodities 2 through 5? And I'm not sure they do. And we'll see. I think some of these guys are getting a second shot, in some cases a third shot. And this year too, we're going to find out who's going to remain with this team moving forward when all this talent does migrate to the majors in 2025 and 2026. I really think it comes down to, can Cruz's bat pick up? Can Reynolds' bat continue to go, better than it was, especially at the middle and the end part of last year? Does Ke'Bryan Hayes pitch in and do that? I mean, there's no doubt that the guy has a glove.
Right.
But can he do better at the plate to help this team do more than 500 and make them competitive for a wild card?
You're watching the Three Rivers podcast. I am Ed Troop. That is Joe 412 from Draft Nation and Draft 412. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft in here in just a little bit, but we're talking Pittsburgh Pirate baseball now. The Pirates open up their 2024 season tomorrow at Miami. Our own Brian Carruthers and his family will be there for that series over the next few days in Miami. Brian's en route to Miami right now as we speak. You mentioned, Joe, a little bit ago about Paul Skeens, and Brian and I have talked about Paul Skeens a few times here over the last couple months, especially when it was announced he wasn't going to be on the opening day roster. Business decision clearly from a financial standpoint. Most likely we should see him in mid to late June. Do you support that decision? Do you understand the decision? Where are you on the Paul Skeens?
Well, I don't. I understand it, right? Years of control make a difference. And if you rewind the clock to where Garrett Cole was, I mean, I get it. I really do get it from a team perspective, especially when you're not going to be able to pay them a second contract. But at the end of the day, if you want to fill the seats, you have Paul Skeens starting opening day. Everyone's going to want to come out and see the future of the Pirates. And, eventually this team's going to have to open up for one of these guys longer term. And I think that, sure, they want to, those years of control make a difference. But, it's hard to justify why the best player in the organization isn't here, right? It's just, look, sure, he hasn't pitched a game yet. Doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter. And you have a lineup that features him and Keller 1 and 2. Now you're cooking with gas, and so I think they made the right decision for the business, the wrong decision for the team and the results for this year. But look, that's not my decision to make. And frankly, I think that even though Skeens is the best player in the organization, if I were them, if I would have rerun the clock, if I were them on the day of draft day, I would have gone in a different direction and taken Dylan Cruz. It would have addressed an obvious position of need, which was outfield, a guy that's going to affect the results on the field 140 times out of the year as opposed to 30. And that kind of guy too. I know, again, you might lose control if you start him day one, but it doesn't matter. You've got to play them and get them in. And but they went the Skeens way. And look, I don't think you can make a wrong decision here. There was no right or wrong answer. The guy Skeens clearly has the talent, and it's like, oh, do you want the ace pitcher, or do you want the ace outfielder? It's like, we'll settle here, and we'll take the pitcher for all the right reasons. And I can't fault them for that. I would have gone a different direction, but they chose where they're going, and we'll see if they made the right choice.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Last year, Joe, the Pirates finished the season 10 games under 500, 76 and 86. They got off to that hot start, if you remember, the first month and a half or so of the season. I think going into mid to late May, they were something incredibly, 15 or 20 games above was it 15 games above 500, I think? Or
I think
they got off to a hot start.
Yeah, 20-9 coming out of it. They just killed it. In the beginning part of the season, they were doing very well. But they regressed to the mean, right? They didn't have the talent to continue. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about baseball. You know what the best teams are because they lasted. They have 160. The season's just way too long, not for the law of averages to play itself out, and they did for the Pirates. I mean, the Pirates were hot, but it's hard to keep that up if you're not as that good. And when you're trying to win 99, 100 games, you really. You kind of you'll see where they really are, and that's what we saw in the beginning. I think they really knocked it out of the park, did a really good job, and then everybody came back to earth. And I'm afraid the team's not much better this year than it was last year, and I'm expecting a lot of the same things this year. Maybe a little bit better, just based on some of the talent that will be here. But I honestly think that you're looking at a team that's still a year away.
What's a successful season, Joe, you think, for the Pirates here in 2024? Again, I mentioned it's 76 and 86, 10 games under 500 from a year ago. Is 82 wins, 85 wins the goal for this year, to be competitive going into September, or all the above?
Yeah, I think that would be, if I were them, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a successful season where we're above 500 as an organization, and that you've gotten experience for some of your guys that are in the minors that you're going to want to use in 2025 as starters, right? And moving them up in a permanent capacity here. You want to see progress. You want to see, this team getting better and gelling. And I think that that's really what this season's all about. I don't think this is a championship caliber team. I'm not even sure it's a playoff team. They'll stay in the wild card race just based on how the new rules are. And so they'll be 5, 6, 8 games back here or there. And they may get on a streak and, be at the top of that race for a while. I think they would outperform if they were really chasing that as a goal this year. But I think as long as the team comes together, they identify pieces they want to keep long-term, and they get some of those prospects up here to prove that they've got what it takes to be in the majors full-time in 2025 and or 2026 maybe. I think that's really a winning season for this club. If that's what you want to expect, that if I'm Cherington, that's what I want to see.
I agree. I agree completely. I think you got to take steps, right? They're building blocks towards the future. You got a good young core of young talent in the minors, and some here on the major league roster for 2024, as you said, Joe. Just take that next step this year. Be competitive late in the season. Don't fire all the bullets in the gun, if you will, the first 2 months of the season, and then you're out of ammunition for the June through September, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, prolong it the whole season. I think that would be a good goal for the 2024 Pirates. Looking ahead for the Buccos, they will open up tomorrow, Thursday at 4:10 at Miami. It's a game one of a 4-game set in Miami. Friday, the Pirates play at 7:10, 4:10 on Saturday. They wrap up in Miami on Sunday at 1:40. And then they go to Washington for a 3-game series next week. Monday off Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Monday start time 4:05 in the nation's capital. And then they come home a week this Friday, the home opener at PNC Park. Oneberg will be there for a Oneberg live event. The Orioles come to town to open up the Pirates' home season. The homestand on Friday, April 5th at 4:12. They'll also play Saturday against the Orioles at 4:05, and then Sunday, April 7th at 1:35 against the Orioles. So that's the next, let's see, 10 games, the first 10 games of the season, 4 in Miami, 3 in Washington, and then the 3 set at home against the Orioles to start out the season. Joe, let's get your prediction. Why not? It's the day before, right? It's Major League Baseball Eve for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You mentioned the prediction a little bit in your analysis of the season, but do you have a number in mind?
500, right? I think they'll do themselves some justice. I think that they will improve. There'll be a core of this team that comes together this year. They're going to see flashes from guys in the minors when they come up. They're going to see progression from those that are here already that they want to see more progression from. I think that there'll be sellers at the trading deadline, and I think for all the good reasons, all the right reasons, they will be. I hope that they're still competitive there toward the end, but I think if we get to a point where they end the season at 500 or a little bit above, that's what Pirate fans should hope for. That's what the organization should want. And then going into 2025, there should be a lot more hype around this team.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 80 wins on my end. So I'm going to say it's an 80-win season, which I think for them will be good. Hopefully they can stay with that 80-win range and keep them competitive through the year. And hey, 80 wins is 4 more than last year. And again, if they can continue to show signs of better days ahead, as you said, in the upcoming year or two, then that'll be a good thing for the Pirates. Let's switch gears to the draft. And Joe, you see it right there on the screen, Draft Nation, Draft 412. Of course, you're Joe 412. Join us here on the Three Rivers podcast for this week. I am your host, Ed Troop. Joe, tell us a little bit more about Draft Nation, Draft 412, and of course, the upcoming event you guys have that I'll be a part of as well. I'm very excited about that coming up here on the first night of the NFL draft in 4 weeks.
Yeah, and look, and we're really excited to have you there. It's going to be fun. Oneberg's going to be there. Every year, what we've tried to do is annualize an event on the first night of the draft and make it a big draft watch party. Last year and this year, it was at Stage AE. And this year's beneficiaries for the fundraiser are going to be Aaron Donald's 8099 Solutions Foundation and the Three Rivers Special Olympics. And so we've got 2. Last year, we did it for Jerome Bettis. Went really well. We sold out and had a great time watching the Steelers, draft, have a great draft, nailing Broderick Jones, and then day 2, first guy out of the hole is Joey Porter Jr. and they get Keanu Benton later in that round. So it was a great time last year. Raised money for a great cause. We're doing it again this year on April 25th. Tickets are still available. You can come to draftnation.com and buy them right there. And you might not know us as Draft Nation. We were Draft 412 last year. We've since grown, and we're now in 3 cities, including Charlotte and Indianapolis, with the designs on being in 8 to 10 cities by the end of next year. And Draft Nation is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bunch of draftniks that come together that are hyper-focused on their teams and team building. So we did a lot of team building discussions about the Bucs. We cover them too. Just put out a new prospect guide a few weeks ago that's available on Amazon, or you can buy it on our site too, for the top 75 prospects for the Pirates. We cover the Penguins. We also cover Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia, and anything that's Draft 412 centric. But Draft Nation's a new website, which has been up for almost an entire whopping 3 weeks, and we've already had plenty of people signing up to it. The membership right now is free, so people can go there and sign up for it, log in, and and be able to read articles that are team building oriented. You're not going to go on there and find box scores. You're going to go on there and find out about salary caps and trade deadlines and free agency and what the team's needs may be. Or today, earlier this morning, we were at Pitt's Pro Day, checking out some of the guys that are trying to scrap their way into the league next year. And that's really who we are and what we do. And if you want to be part of Draft Nation, it's free right now. So go ahead and sign up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you go and sign up. I actually signed up this morning, Joe. I've been on the site a dozen times since you and I met there over a month ago. But this morning I signed up. I can tell you it's very easy. Just throw your email address in there, sign up, make sure you enroll and be a part of the great Draft Nation team out there. Joe, you're a constant professional. My sign fell behind me right in the middle of your dialogue, and you just kept going. I fixed it. And
kept going. I wasn't going to mention it, brother.
I mean, it looked awful, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, the sign half fell. Do I just leave it or do I fix it?
We all have wardrobe malfunctions. That was a little bit better than some others we know.
Isn't that the truth? Nothing fell off of me, and you don't want to see anything on me, that's for sure.
Or
But Joe,
Carruthers.
yeah, exactly, exactly. We've seen enough from him, but you kept going, so I appreciate that. Well, since we're talking about the draft, and again, that is Draft Nation's 2024 Pro Football Draft Party, Thursday, April 25th, Stage AE from 7 to 10:30, right?
Well, if you buy VIP tickets, you get in at 6, and it'll run till about 11:30. Last year, that first round went pretty late, but come and go as you want. But VIP will get you in at 6. 7 o'clock is general admission. We'll have a fun time. We'll kick it off at 8 o'clock with the NFL draft, and watch the first round go down, and hopefully the Steelers make it exciting for everybody like they did last year.
Speaking of the Steelers, let's talk a little bit about the draft upcoming, Joe. And of course, it's been a very active free agency period for Omar Khan and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lots of trades. Of course, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Patrick Queen being the head of all the acquisitions so far this year. Deontay Johnson, Kenny Pickett get traded. I've said all along, and I've not changed my thinking on this. The Steelers' first pick at number 20 will be a offensive lineman, in my opinion. I'm really thinking they're going to go after another tackle to play opposite side of Broderick Jones in this upcoming draft, or maybe they get another corner to play opposite side of Joey Porter Jr. here in this upcoming draft. But those of us that love offense and we get excited about playmakers probably would like them to look at a wide receiver possibly at that number 20 pick too. The good news for Steeler Nation, all three of those positions I just mentioned, especially offensive line and wide receiver, are pretty deep this year in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, right? I think the Steelers are going to go offensive line for the second year in a row. They're going to try to find the replacement for. I mean, they're going to obviously move Broderick Jones over to left tackle, and this is a contract year for Dan Moore. And I think the line showed market improvement last year when Broderick Jones was in there on the running game. Had a little bit to learn on the passing game, but he was playing just off tackle. He was not used to being on the right side. I think flipping back to the left will help him on that, and that year of seasoning will definitely help him. But with a core four gone, they're going to have to replace that. They did not do that and address it at all in the first wave of free agency, and I think that tips their hand a little bit. But you're right. I mean, there are plenty of corners and wide receivers in this draft. And unless someone ridiculous falls to them at 20, I think they're going to draft an offensive lineman. Now, that could be a right tackle. That could also be a center, right? They did not re-sign Mason Cole. There's some rumors out there that Cole might come back in a reserve capacity for them, as he's not really, grabbed any kind of attention in the free agent market to date. But ultimately, too, if the right corner or the right receiver, like Brian Thomas Jr., if he's there, it's really hard to pass that up at that position. But there's also, I think, what Khan has showed is he's going to be aggressive. He's going to go out there, and I'm not sure they're done before the draft. I mean, there's rumors out there about Brandon Ayuk, or we've heard, even some self-serving rumors from folks here locally about Terry McLaurin or even Justin Jefferson. As part of this, I think that Khan's going out there and is going to look for somebody. In the last few days, they've brought on Patterson, who can play receiver, obviously running back, and special teams for them. They got some depth with Quez Watkins they brought in from Philadelphia, and maybe that's something that is more of a Russell Wilson play, where the guy has some great straight line speed, and Russ has always thrown a pretty deep ball, and maybe they're trying to build something there. But that's still something they can address in this draft in rounds 3 through 6. There's that much talent there. So I think that, to be fair, offensive line is hard to pass up in round 1. And, I'm thinking that, round 2, and they've got 2 picks now in round 3, they'll be able to get their receiver, get another corner, and address it, and maybe have 2 offensive linemen by the time we leave day 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you take a look at all those needs. I mean, those plug a lot of holes for them right off the bat on the first day of training camp, right? You could plug any of those positions in, and they're going to be an impact player. And I think that's what Omar Khan and company is looking for, in the draft last year. And it obviously produced several starters, several future starters as well. I mean, last year's draft class right now still looks to be phenomenal, especially the first year out for Omar Khan. And you'd have to expect to see, very similar type of results upcoming this draft, because I think the draft's even that much better this year from a talent perspective for what they're going to be able to pull from. So I'm absolutely excited to see who they end up drafting coming up here in the upcoming draft. Talk to me a little bit about the other picks, Joe. The top 5 this year. as far as in the NFL draft. Who do you like? Who do you think is going to go in the first few picks? A lot of talks, of course, around the quarterback position. One interesting note that I read just before we came on the air, there's a statistic out there that, since the year of 2000, there's been 66, not counting last year, but 66 first-round quarterbacks taken in the draft, and 36 of those 66 have not panned out. They've been busts. That means over half of first-round draft pick quarterbacks have not panned out in the last 24 years.
I think the quarterback position is a position that always will be overdrafted. And in part, it's because it's so critical to the success of your team. Very rarely do you win a Super Bowl if you don't have someone that would be dubbed as a franchise quarterback. I mean, we can literally count them on one hand, perhaps, right? And you go back and the Doug Williamses of the world, or the Trent Dilfers that won because of that amazing defense that was there, or you find somebody that like that fits that mold, like Brad Johnson back in the day for the Bucks. You find it, but that might be it. Every other name you're going to recognize because they're in the Hall of Fame, right? And so these teams are willing to take a risk and drafting a guy and getting someone there. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, getting back to your original assertion, at the top of this draft. I mean, we might see a draft that features 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. And only that will happen if Arizona, trades out. And the rumor mills are just churning with that stuff. But obviously the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams. I mean, that's been set up now for months. With the trade of Justin Fields, just solidified it. At 2, the Commanders will likely stay put and take their choice. Now, although I think number 2 is Drake May, the hot name is Jaden Daniels, and they might, choose one of those guys. But then the big riser on the board has been Michigan's J.J. McCarthy. And, and so what do we do at number 3, if you're the New England Patriots? Do you take Drake May, who's sitting there for you, or do you take the riser and J.J. McCarthy, or do you trade down? And Minnesota's already loaded up. I mean, they've got 2 first rounds. Everybody knows they're trying to come up. And there's even, at today's Pitt Pro Day, I heard the rumor that, that all the talk and all the bluster that has been coming from Harbaugh about J.J. McCarthy's Pro Day being the best he's ever seen is not that. You would think it's just smoke. It might not be. You might see a guy like Justin Herbert moved to Minnesota for those 2 picks. And then San Diego, listen to me, the Chargers in LA, might be, taking JJ McCarthy. There's just craziness. There's literally craziness. But my sense is if the Cardinals stay put and the Chargers stay put, I think that next team that would be up would be the New York Giants. They're obviously, in the marketplace for a receiver and a quarterback, if they're not happy with Daniel Jones's health prognoses. But there's going to be some moves up there, and you're going to see at least 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10. And then you got that next run of guys below them. Like Minnesota trades up, they've got their quarterback, and then below that you've got Denver at 12 and the Raiders at 13, who also could arguably choose, a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix. And we might see a draft that has 5 quarterbacks go in the first round, maybe even 6. I don't think so. I think it'll be closer to 4 or 5. And some of those teams could trade back once those top guys are off the board, gather additional draft capital, and still get their guy. But we'll see. And I think that'll be the exciting piece of the top 5. But I think it's kind of predictable. It's just a matter of who's getting the right order and who's taking whom.
I think J.J. McCarthy's exciting, man. I watched him in the Rose Bowl and the national title game. There was just something about the way that he plays the game at that quarterback position. He has that thing about him, that winning attitude, that winning drive, and just goes out, much like what we saw from Tom Brady over the career. And again, I'm not putting him on Tom Brady's radar even, but he has just that mystique about him on the field. And if I was an NFL team, he'd be one guy that I would definitely be considering. It's interesting you say about that trade with Harbaugh, trying to get J.J. McCarthy back. As wild as that sounds, it sounds very realistic too, and it makes sense.
Well, he has killed that. I mean, literally in the offseason, that team, Austin Eckler gone, Keenan Allen gone, Mike Williams gone. What we knew of the LA Chargers last year, save for Justin Herbert, it's gone. Right. So is it an entire restart? I'm going to bring in my guy. Or are they going to build around Herbert by bringing in? Because look, they spent one last year on Quentin Johnston, and he didn't have the greatest of rookie seasons. But that happens for receivers. I mean, it's not an easy league, and the transition's not as easy as people think. Even though they think, well, it's not. And so Quentin Johnston had the kind of season that a lot of first-year receivers have. Secondly, they're not going to just stick around with Josh Palmer, right? So there's going to be some moves there, and I think that the consensus was that they would plug that in with a receiver at 5. If Marvin Harrison was gone, or if Marvin Harrison fell to them because the Minnesota Vikings traded up to 4 with the Cardinals, and then he's sitting there, or even the rumors about Brock Bowers. I mean, Brock Bowers is a top 5, top 10 talent, but he's in a position you would rarely want to spend that top 5, top 10 talent in tight end. But that's something that we all know that Jim Harbaugh loves. He uses his tight ends. He used them when he was at San Francisco, used them when he was at Michigan. He's going to use it here. And, again, that there's a hole there for them, right? So there's a play for any and all of that. And I think that, as strange as it might sound, in the beginning of the draft talk, we were talking about how Chicago, the draft was going to run through them this year. I also think that if Harbaugh plays his cards the way he seems to be playing them, it may run through LA, and we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a fun night. It always is. And there's a lot of drama around that. And with Harbaugh trying to make a splash and mold this team in the way he wants, he might want his guy to do it, or a Blake Corum in a round 2. You know what I mean? And see the Michigan reunion out in LA. We'll see.
Mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr., man. He might be the best player in the draft, in my opinion, at least the most athletic and exciting player outside of all these great quarterbacks you mentioned before. He's definitely, like his dad, he's going to be a big-time impact player at the wide receiver position in the NFL. Joe, that's going to do it for our broadcast, man. We want to thank you for coming on and joining us here this afternoon. Again, you can catch Joe at Draft Nation, and you can catch Joe and myself and a cast of thousands at Stage AE on Thursday, April 25th. If you get the VIP ticket, you can get in at 6. If not, you can get in at 7. It's the 2024 Pro Football Draft Party with Draft Nation on Thursday, again, April 25th, just 4 weeks from tomorrow, I guess it would be, Joe, at Stage AE.
We're coming close.
We're looking forward to it, Joe, and we appreciate you coming on.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks again, and happy to come back on anytime you need me.
That's going to do it for the Three Rivers podcast for this week. We will